So I try to add a little bit more intensity, but with the main focus of not ending upside down or in a bank.
So I was just like, oh my God, I'm going to be surrounded by like all the fastest riders. And I didn't want that pressure. And as it turned out, the thing I feared most happened, which was Will Longdon.
I spent a lot of the weekend on my upside down, but it was just like comedy because, in those bits where you did crash, you generally weren't going too fast, especially in the stump section. So it was just like, I really enjoyed it. Like, it's nice once you kind of commit to the conditions. It's, just a lot of fun, really.
All right, we are back for a catch-up after an interesting weekend at National Champs. There's some silverware came home with the team for the first time, so that's a pretty exciting thing that we'll definitely talk about. Before we do that, my version of the weekend wasn't quite so impressive, so I'll just share, I guess, where I'm at and why I didn't end up racing. So I've been struggling with fatigue since coming back from Stone King Rally, which is now 4 weeks ago, which in my head seems utterly ridiculous. Like I thought I'd need 1 or 2 weeks off, or 1 or 2 weeks of taking it pretty chill, but I've kind of struggled to get back to any form of exercise, really. I've done a couple of really short e-bike rides and felt pretty tired after those. I did go to Antistiniog last week to put in some laps on the downhill bike, and felt reasonably all right. I was pretty tired by about 2 o'clock, so I did finish then, and I was riding a pretty chill track, and anything that required any real pedaling felt pretty laboured, but I got some good work done on the bike and got it feeling a bit better. Was pretty tired afterwards, and then came down with a cold in the week running up to National Champs, which kind of still got, which is like 6 or 7 days in now, so just kind of trying to take things easy. So I came into the weekend thinking I'd go on track walk on the Friday night, have a look at the track, see how I felt about it, see if the track walk was doable and whether that tired me out too much. And it was all right. The track looked really good, actually. It was like probably in perfect condition on the Friday evening when we track walked, and looked like a lot of fun. And I figured I could probably get through the weekend, like just taking it a bit chill, not putting too many runs in, and have a bit of a go at it. But as it turns out, we had quite a lot of rain overnight, and it rained all day on the Saturday. So I kitted up, got the waterproofs on, and went up for the first run of practice. And that wasn't the track for me to be on in those conditions, like not mentally sharp and definitely not physically there. Like I had a fairly sizable moment pretty early into the track where the bike decided it wanted to go a different way to the way I wanted it to go. And that was enough to kind of make me realise that this wasn't the one. So yeah, we're going to just take it chill for the next week or two. I went on a really slow Zone 1 e-bike road ride today, which is the dullest sounding thing I've ever done. Actually, it was pretty nice to just be out spinning the legs in the sun just for like 40 minutes. And we'll see how we feel, and we'll go from there. So it was a bit of a shame, but we've got these two boys keeping things going, and actually it was kind of nice to just be able to like help out in small ways, like
polish bikes,
getting coffees and polishing bikes, because there was a lot of bike cleaning going on. Yeah, so that's my story. Not great, not super stoked on it, but I think the right decision was made. So yeah, we'll chat to these boys and we'll find out how the real racers got on. Ben, you came up for track walk on Friday night. You did it a little bit later than me because I think you got there about 7:30. But your first track walk of the year, like, how did you find it? Was it a worthwhile exercise?
Yeah. So this is one of the things that we had identified from our first outing that really fell in earlier in the year, was that track walk would be helpful, probably. So I took the luxury of a day off work and made sure I was there at reasonable time. Got to walk up the track, which was helpful, I think, mainly just for me to sort of reassure me that I knew what was coming up, probably more than anything else. Picked out a few lines. The course was quite different to the one we rode a couple of months before, So I had started in the same place, ended in the same place. First few 100 meters were the same. The last section was the same, but then everything else in between was different. And it was is really steep and fast at the top with loads of bus stops, and then into a really difficult, in the conditions, sort of wood section, threading through a lot of new growth trees. Met a few competitors from our class on that track walk, so that was nice to meet them and have people to chat to throughout the weekend. So it was still a really friendly event, even though it's supposedly a bit more serious being the national champs compared to a regional race.
Yeah, it did feel pretty friendly, to be fair. It's the same people, I guess, maybe a few less of them at this one, but it was a few of the people that we sort of bumped into and saw and raced against at the pier. So
yeah, so it's good to make a few more connections. It's always fun.
Definitely.
Yeah,
nice. Johnny, what about you? Your Friday plans didn't quite go as you'd hoped, right?
No, I really didn't set myself up well for this event. I'd come back off a family holiday, and we'd committed to buying a puppy as well. So
on your way home.
On the way home, yeah.
As you do.
But in the grand scheme of things, there's no ideal time to get a puppy. I think it's one of those things you've just got to kind of commit to. So we did. And I ended up getting... I planned to come up on the Friday night, but got home too late, so decided to stay at home and come up early on the Saturday morning, which, in the grand scheme of things, actually worked out quite well. I had a really good run-up and got there not long after you boys, really.
Yeah, literally like 5 minutes after us.
So, yeah, it was all right. And I took heavy advantage of Mr. Breeden's helmet cam. So,
yeah, thanks, Joe Breeden, for posting that. Yeah.
I didn't, I felt like I had a good idea of where the track went. So, even though I didn't do track walk, I was, had a good feel or gist of what was going to happen, I guess.
Yeah, it's super helpful. Hey, looking out for track previews for races is well worth doing. I think I sat and watched that 5 or 6 times just to try and suss out a few of the sections, look at the lines those guys were taking, and yeah, mega helpful stuff. But yeah, like we say, the weather kind of turned in a pretty big way coming into Saturday. So we had rain overnight and then light rain, drizzle, Welsh summer all day on the Saturday. Ben, how was your first run down the track? Because by the time we got there, it was quite different to what we saw on the Friday evening.
Yeah, the bottom half of the track on Friday evening was really pretty dry, which I was quite surprised at, because we've had loads of wet weather up north in the week or so leading into it. So the top hadn't really changed much because it was pretty damp and slippy up there anyway. But the sort of mid-section through the smaller trees was really starting to turn. Well, it's kind of getting sloppy after the first run. And track walk, chatting to people on track walk, I'd been warned that they'd raced there previously, and if it didn't keep raining, then that mud was going to turn to kind of I think peanut butter was the phrase that was used. And people were saying, "Oh, I've had to stop to clear the mud out of my mud guard before you got to race it with no mud guards." So I think after first run, it was getting sloppy, and we all kind of made the decision. And the finish field as well, was getting absolutely lethal, where you sort of drop down, and then there's a right-hander and a left-hander, and just everyone was going down on there.
Yeah, it was comedy. I think everyone was literally dropping it on that turn, first few runs of the day.
I think every rider would have crashed on there at some point during the weekend. So I think I'd come prepared with DHR2s on, and I think just hoped against hope over Friday night that they'd be okay the next day. But the first change after the first run was switching tyres to something a bit more open spaced, narrower, deeper tread pattern.
Yeah, so we were lucky enough to have Max's supporting on tyres, so we had some sets of shorties ready to go. Was that an easy decision after the first run to stick them on then?
Yeah, I don't know. Even at that point, I wasn't 100% sure, I don't think. But it was the right decision, because it just got worse and worse as the day went on. Yeah. But it did leave us, I think, so we got by about midday, and we went back up for the second run, and there was a long course hold whilst we're at the top. And I think by about, it was 12:30 before we were getting into our second run. So at that point, I was starting to think, we haven't got that much practice time left now.
Yeah, the day disappears pretty quickly, eh? How did you find the shortage, Johnny? Was it an obvious change? You went from, I think you had an assegai up front and a DHR2 on the back for your first run. Was it obvious when you moved on to the shorties, like the benefits and or downsides?
I think so. I think overall it was the better choice. It was. I remember the most striking thing was up top, the grip in between the Shaley section. So I think regardless of what tyre you're running, you probably have a similar feel over like the shale, but it was the linking sections where there was dirt. I remember standing myself up on the first run on the shorties because there was so much grip. It was almost the opposite. Like you pull it on your brakes and you had all this traction and you're like, suddenly over braked into all these corners, or stood myself up in a corner because you touched the brake and you had all this grip, and you're like, oh, these tires are amazing. And then you got to the plantation section in the middle, and no more grip.
Yeah, I don't think any tire was going to work through there, right?
No.
How did that section develop, Johnny, throughout the day? Because it did definitely degrade to a pretty horrific state.
I think when it was super wet, for me it was really good. Really enjoyed going through there when it was really, really wet. It was not too much mud stuck to the tyre, so I think you could make the most of what grip you did have, and you could get a really nice, for me I got a really nice flow down there, so it was good. But then I think it didn't stop raining, but it kind of maybe eased a bit, and I think maybe combined with the wind and the fact that plantation section in the middle is open, so I think it dried quicker than any other section on the track, and it turned to peanut butter.
It's not only peanut butter, but a nice, or not even nice, a horrible narrow rut of peanut butter.
It wasn't smooth peanut butter; it was like crunchy peanut butter.
So how did you guys approach getting up to speed on Saturday then? So kind of almost don't want to do too many runs. It's pretty fatiguing riding those conditions. The bikes are getting heavy with mud. You're having to clean them almost every run to kind of keep the bikes rideable. How, Ben, maybe start with you. What was your approach to trying to get everything up to speed?
I think it just sets you back because I'd been working on this sort of riding a bit faster than I'm comfortable with, trying to carry a bit more speed out of the corners. And I'd gone there with sort of a focus on that and a plan to sort of build as things went on. Classic racer talk, building speed through the weekend starts to mean something now. And that was the plan. But then you arrive and the conditions are always changing. For me, it's definitely about feeling confident as well. So you've got to factor in it's wet now. There's that extra doubt from, what you're going to come across. So there's a couple of runs getting used to the conditions before you can then start to think about, all right, where could I go faster? Am I confident in these conditions? So it kind of just pushed things back a bit for me. But I think we got 5 runs in on Saturday. I think that's about right. And
yeah, sounds about right.
I won't go too far ahead, but there was time to get over that and start working on things.
Yeah.
I guess as well, lines changed. So on the plan, let's call it the plantation section. On the plantation
stump section,
stump section. There was some sort of, you could straight line through in some sections, and they'd be feasible for a couple of runs, and then the exit would be totally destroyed, and you couldn't run that. I think we ended our last run of the day from a sort of pro chat overheard in the uplifts, just giving the main line a run and trying to ride the main line as fast as we could. And that worked pretty well too, because you just sat in that groove and followed it down. Getting out of it was risky. So it added another dimension to on track thinking, definitely.
For sure.
But then there's also the like off-track stuff, the like trying to clean your bike. Do you go back, clean your bike between runs? What kit are you going to keep wearing? My God, were we glad of our amazing Fox full set of beautiful waterproofs that kept us totally, kept us dry on the outside, dry on the inside, comfortable. Really good fit on that kit.
Fair play.
Yeah.
You boys were stoked with that. I only did one run in them and they seemed good, but that's not like a day in the rain. But yeah, if anyone's looking for good waterproofs, genuinely, they're expensive, but that Fox Flex Air Near Shell jacket and pants, they do the job, to be fair.
Totally recommend
including being jet washed at the end of the day and still being dry after the jet wash.
On the inside.
On the inside.
Yeah.
So impressed.
Yeah, that is pretty good, isn't it? Yeah, and that's what you need, right? I think like you saw, I obviously had the chance to see a lot of people coming off the hill and like sense the vibe in other people's pits, and there were a lot of people that were like kind of not enjoying it, I think. And I was really impressed that you boys like kept a smile on your face, kept it pretty lighthearted all day. Like you seemed to genuinely be finding a way to enjoy it, which was quite impressive. Was that fair, Johnny? Was that how you were feeling?
Yeah, so I think I'd accepted well before, like the week before we came, I was like, it's going to be wet. I'd seen the forecast and I wasn't hoping it was going to be dry. I was like, oh, it's going to be wet. And, I think once you accept that, you can just have a lot of fun with it. So, especially in North Wales, I think the hills, the terrain kind of lends itself to being wet. It is normally wet. And
it's the standard.
So, the top section, even though it was wet, there's still a fair amount of grip. There were some roots and what have you, but it was all rideable and you could still ride it all at speed. It was steep enough that you weren't having to slog. The worst thing is when it's muddy and there's not enough gradient and you're having to kind of like pedal through like sloppy mud and you're just so fatigued. I spent a lot of the weekend on my upside down. But it was just like comedy because, in those bits where you did crash, you generally weren't going too fast, especially in the stump section. So it was just like, I really enjoyed it. Like, it's nice. Once you kind of commit to the conditions, it's just a lot of fun, really.
Yeah. How was your Saturday, Johnny, as far as like getting up to speed goes?
The morning was really good. I think until we stopped for lunch, I felt I was kind of building speed nicely, and that was probably the high point, really. I think it got more of a struggle for me after that.
Yeah. What do you think was going on there? Like, obviously the conditions, I think it's fair to say like every run on Saturday, the conditions were getting worse, not better.
Yeah, they were. The top section was wasn't getting any wetter or drier, but it was getting more cut up. There was a lot more braking bumps developing, so it was getting a lot rougher. And the plantation stump section was you choose your own adventure. Every time you came down, there was a different route you could take, and you come into a section and there'd be different options, and it didn't quite look the same. So, as Ben said, we chose, the riding the main line was almost the lower cognitive load because you didn't have to make those decisions. You just like, well, I'm just going to ride the main line. And if there was something, I always think if there's something obvious that pops out to you, then it's the type of line that you would normally take. So you take that line. And that's kind of how I approached it, really. But I think the other thing was that to begin with, I was riding kind of no brakes through that section, and I towards in the afternoon I was catching some people, and through that section I'd always catch people, and there'd be people crashing in front of you, or you'd have to dab on the brakes, and as soon as you touch the front brakes, which after chatting with Ollie Morris, he's like, don't touch the front brake,
not in a rut,
because it just sends your wheel off to one side. And I realised that in the afternoon I had been doing that because I'd been either behind somebody or somebody had crashed or there'd been an incident. And as soon as you did that, you were dabbing and you'd lose that kind of equilibrium, and you couldn't kind of like do that like nice wiggle along and keep the bike light. You'd put yourself out, and then trying to, I ride clips, so trying to get my foot back in was a nightmare. And then you'd either slowed down, or for me, crashed on my head, got back up, carry on, crashed on my head. And as soon as you did that, your shoes were full of mud, your tyres were full of mud, so then you had even less grip. So it was just one of these things that just kept snowballing. So it was still a lot of fun, but it was frustrating. It was only in hindsight, when Ollie said, "Don't touch your brakes," I realised that I had been touching my brakes because of kind of what had been happening. But I did chat with some other guys who were on flats, and they were saying, well, yeah, I got into the habit because I was on flats of taking your foot off, and they had exactly the same problem that I was having with clips, with taking a foot off. And so they were like consciously trying to keep their feet on, like I was doing, but finding it just as difficult and almost more tempting to put a foot down because they were on flats.
Yeah. What impact was that, like lots of crashing one after the other kind of thing? Like, what was that doing to your confidence? Because for me, I am very good at dragging myself down when that's happening and like getting into a downward spiral. Were you able to like stay above that and kind of keep it positive?
It was quite lighthearted to begin with. All of Saturday, it was just comedy. Like, if somebody crashes in front of you, what can you do? Like, it's just one of those things. And at that point, I just put it down to that. It's just like, it's just one of those things. It's not. I'm not going to let it know my confidence. It was none of the crashes hurt at that point, so I was fine. It was just
cool.
Crack on, really.
Yeah, fair play. And then there was a little bit more Joe Breeden headcam watching on Saturday night at the accommodation. Apologies that I booked a place that seemed to have bunk beds made for really, really short people. And we're quite short and couldn't lie straight in them. So sorry about that. Try better for the next round. I have gone on Airbnb today and checked that for the Hopton round, we have got full size beds.
Oh, brilliant. What a treat.
So we should be pretty happy with that. It rained quite heavily overnight, I think, again on the Saturday night, but then was dry with a fairly strong breeze all of Sunday. Mm-hmm. So things started to dry out pretty quickly, which certainly for the field section at the bottom, which had been like ice throughout Saturday and had taken a lot of riders down, was a good thing. It was starting to improve that, and definitely by race runs, that was in pretty good nick. But I'm not sure, again, it was like necessarily the best thing, certainly early in the day. Like, how was morning practice for you, Ben? What was your plan, and then how did that go?
Morning practice was like another, right, let's see what, the first run was like, let's see what we're facing this morning. And it was still pretty wet. It was still pretty wet first run. The field in particular didn't really pick up till like the qualifying runs, I don't think. For me, I struggle to remember courses. We've had long conversations about this whilst doing this project. Maybe we'll come back to that. It's not a discussion for today, but I put a fair bit of effort into memorizing the top sections before the plantation. Once I was in the plantation, I can remember what was coming next. But there's a lot of bus stops at the top, fire road crossings. So I put some effort into remembering which bus stop was coming next, basically. Mm-hmm. So I was testing that out on Sunday morning, which definitely helped. And it was because we were kind of, after that first run, we kind of got getting quite confident with it. The Saturday afternoon, it had been carnage. I'd come off a couple of times on the Saturday afternoon, but I'd felt I was maybe riding, seeing people having more difficulties than I was, perhaps. That definitely helped my confidence. And I think probably a benefit for me is, we're talking about the last round. I don't like riding at high speed. It scares me.
Yeah,
so,
and it was flat out at the last round. It would have been if it was dry at this one.
Right? Yeah. So I was quite liking the fact that the mud had slowed things down a bit. And I grew up riding in muddy conditions like that. So I felt fairly at home. So Sunday morning up to the quali run was then trying to sort of like try and put into practice those things we've been working on prior to the race, like trying to get off the brakes a bit earlier in corners to carry a bit more speed out. Maybe go a bit faster on. There were a couple of flat out sections. There's a couple of lovely big sort of fadey jump straightaways. So push my speed on those a little bit beyond what I'd normally be comfortable with, and try and get everything lined up for the quali run, basically.
Yeah, fair. Johnny, what about you? Morning practice, 2 runs, I think, right?
Yeah, that's
like
right.
What was your approach?
Trying to stay on the bike was my plan, and it didn't pan out, and I crashed each of the runs. The first one, both runs multiple times, I think, if I remember correctly. Once. Yeah, once per run. I was annoyed I didn't get a clean run through the plantation section, just for the same issue, catching people. And I had a crash at the top, the second 5-road crossing, which goes down into a steep chute, and it had become really. There's lots of braking bumps and holes that had developed because it was quite shaly, and the shale had all kind of like been dragged off to the sides, and it was probably one of the rougher parts, and it was quite fast. And I come into that section and just veer off to the right into the bank at speed and body check it. So I didn't kind of go tumbling. I just came to like an abrupt halt, and my right quad and right arm a little bit sore yesterday. So I did that. I had a crash at the plantation. So it wasn't ideal going into the seeding run, but that's what it was.
Yeah, fair play. Yeah. So what were you like looking for reasons? Were you just accepting that it was conditions and that the crashes are likely? Like, how were you trying to process? Because it sounds like you've been through most of Saturday afternoon and all of Sunday morning before it really counts, basically having at least one crash a run.
It's kind of
hard.
I just put it down to I wasn't riding very well, and I was just struggling with the conditions, and I didn't really know why I was crashing so much, really. But I was just struggling with my riding.
Yeah. So coming into seeding then, like, how do you try and approach that? Did you try and change anything? Like, how did you look at trying to get it down in one piece?
I just tried to ride the main line and just take it really steady. I just wanted to get down, and I had the same crash on the chute. It didn't really cost me a great deal of time. I didn't like come off the bike, but I just body checked into the bank, had a layover, pushed back up and carried on. Unfortunately, it's quite a fast section of track, so you can lose quite a bit of time. I don't know how much I lost, but I just wanted to kind of get down, and then I just kind of, after that, I just kind of like wiggled down.
Yeah. So you seeded 6th with a bit of a crash in, like you say, in a fast section of the track. Was that like, did that help confidence to see, oh, well, I'm 6th and I know I
didn't even know.
I can definitely
You're telling me
that.
now and I didn't even know.
Oh, really? You didn't look?
No.
Okay. Is there a reason?
I knew the time. So I knew the time gaps, but I didn't know the position. So I knew where I was on that front, but I wasn't. The positions didn't really concern me. There wasn't really that many in our category. So whether you were,
and when you say time gap, who are you looking at? The winner? Are you looking at the gap to the winner?
I was looking at the winner. I was looking at my difference to Ben, because we ride all the time. So I've got a good gauge of like, sometimes he's ahead of me, sometimes I'm behind him. I'm ahead of him. Sorry, sometimes I'm ahead of him, sometimes he's ahead of me, and there's generally a kind of a window where we kind of like oscillate between. So I was just seeing, and I was a fair way back from that, and it was But I had that crash, and then I wiggled down. So I was really just trying to get down without crashing, but I didn't really achieve it.
Yeah. But felt like you had some more in the tank for race runs by the sound of it. Like,
yeah, I'm always confident. Right. I'm always confident that I can go faster in a race run.
Yeah, makes sense. Ben, what about you? You seeded 4th. Like, how did you approach your seeding run?
I guess similar to Johnny. Just get get down clean was the main priority, really. And I did that. The seeding run was probably my best run of the weekend. It was, clean through all the top stuff. Nothing too wild. Got the lines that I was aiming for, and then in the bottom woods, just wiggled, but managed to ride it all clean without any real issues, and not getting out of shape at all. Really tentative across the final field because wasn't really sure what condition that was in, but by that point it was really improving quite a lot, and then made some effort on the final straight down to the finish, which I don't always do. So
did you pedal in the seeding run for that bit?
Yeah, down the field. Okay. Yeah. And it went as well as I could hope for, basically. It was clean, it was pretty smooth, it was fast, where it needed to be fast. So I was chuffed with that.
And yeah, you said, obviously, that 4th is an awesome position to seed in. And you commented almost straight away, I wish I hadn't done that. Like, what was going through your mind?
I think what was going through my mind was, well, I think prior to the race, we'd looked at the entry list, and I was slightly concerned that I was going to have Andrew Titley behind me in the start gate for the seeding run. But
who is an ex-pro elite rider from back in the day? He was very quick. If people don't remember,
PT era, but also a bit of a legendary personality as well.
Yeah.
But it wasn't seeded in that way. In fact, he was in front of me in the qualifying run. So I was just like, oh my God, I'm going to be surrounded by like all the fastest riders. And I didn't want that pressure. And as it turned out, the thing I feared most happened, which was Will Longdon, who is the Madison Saracen team manager, but also an ex-pro from the sort of, Road for MB UK, very
World Cup level rider,
reigning champion, probably, I think, in the category as well. I think he won it last.
Maybe not. I think last year he was in snowshoe because it overlapped snowshoe and Glencoe, but he's definitely won the sleeve on multiple occasions. I think. And
also responsible for one of the most memorable pieces of riding I've ever seen in the flesh, a national from a long time ago. So I was slightly aghast that he was going to be starting behind, because it runs in reverse, well, like slowest to fastest for the finals run, like a World Cup would.
Yeah.
And he was one place ahead of me, so he was behind me in the start hut. Yeah, there was a start hut. We need to mention the fact that there was a start hut. It was
shout out to Borderline Events for putting an actual physical start hut out. It felt pretty pro.
It did feel very pro, and it was nice to sit in when it was pouring with rain as well. Clean your goggles before you start.
So how was it then? You're up there for your race run. It's national championships, just to add a little bit of pressure. We've never done that before. We've only done one downhill race in the last however many years, quite a few. And suddenly you've got Will Longdon behind you as your 32nd man, and it's your race run. Like, what's going through your head? How did you manage it?
Well, I was a little bit worried, but you kind of like calm me down somehow. Head down, and you're like, it's 30 seconds. He's never going to catch 30 seconds on you down there. So I was like, okay, maybe not. I mean, he had clearly been holding back in his quali run to get down clean, I guess. But that did reassure me. And once I was into the run, it wasn't in my mind at all. Cool. You just focus on it. You've got plenty to occupy you I wasn't concerned. I might have listened out for whistles, for martial whistles behind, but I guess maybe I'd have picked up on that if there had been some, but otherwise it didn't really cross my mind. I was focused on getting to the bottom instead.
Good stuff, man. Well, and how was that race run then? Can you remember much from it?
Yeah, it felt fast, but it felt like it had just tipped over the edge into being scrappy. So, I've in the plantation section, I knocked my feet off in a deeper rut. Felt a bit ragged into some of the turns, and the sort of almost lost the front in the top section in one of the S-bend turns, probably where Johnny's talking about getting stood out to the side. So it wasn't quite as clean as the quali run, and I think it was faster, but I think that's probably down to the fact that probably mainly to do with the last field section being absolutely bone dry. Whereas in the qualifying seeding run, we'd had to sort of skate across there really tentatively. So I think any time gains came from that.
Yeah,
I should look at the splits actually. Not sure
we'll talk about time gains in a bit. Johnny, talk us through your race run, mate.
So I try to add a little bit more intensity, but with the main focus of not ending upside down or in a bank. I decided that on the chute that I'd crashed into the side the previous two runs, that I was just going to come out of it and ride down the shale and essentially square the corner off rather than round it. And to kind of like touch on something Benoit was mentioned, that one of the things I was trying to focus on this weekend was rounding out the corners and keeping my pedals level and keeping a really consistent body position, which largely I managed to do over the weekend. However, I committed there to not rounding the corner and squaring it just to make sure that I didn't get bucked off into the side. So that was a result. Yeah. It wasn't the run I was after, but I got down without any other incidents. The plantation was a choose your own adventure. I chose unwisely, but got down safely. Didn't hurt myself, so it was pretty happy to come away with a clean. The last run being a clean run, given that I'd not been able to get down cleanly since the Saturday after lunch, I think.
Yeah, impressive stuff. And looking into the results, I think I've done the maths right. On average, people were making about 9 to 10 seconds up over their their seeding run. Seemed to be a pretty consistent average across the field. You made 18 seconds from seeding to race.
Yeah, but I didn't fall off.
Yeah, but how long were you realistically? You thought that crash didn't cost you very much.
Yeah. It is what it is.
6th place. How do you feel about that? Coming out of the weekend, are you happy with that? Unhappy with that?
That's all right.
Sorry, 5th place.
5th place. Yeah, I was just going to say. I was going to check. That's pretty happy. I think I was a similar amount of time off 33. No, but it's a bit behind where I was at the last race in terms of time gaps, but I wasn't riding it as well as I was at the first round, I don't think. I felt I was lacking a bit, really. However, I probably had more fun at this one in the wet than the first one in the dry.
That's nice.
It was. I really did like riding in the wet. I thought it was, and I was quite excited about it because in the past I've done quite well at wet races. So I think I was more frustrated that I couldn't put together the run I wanted in those conditions. But it was still a lot of fun.
That's cool, because a lot of people, I think, certainly racers, when you're going racing, people link fun to performance pretty strongly. So it's really cool to hear you say you had more fun, despite you saying that your performance from your perspective wasn't as good as the Pierce round. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think some of this is like what we've been talking about. It's the fun for me is the process. So it's, even if you don't perform as well. There's something to look into as to, well, why is that the case? Can you have a look into that? And so it gives you something to then improve on. And the race is really just a marker point in time to judge how good your process is. And as long as you're enjoying the process, then I don't need those points in time to tell me that I'm not having a good time. It's like, well, did I do badly? Was there a reason I did badly? Did I do well? Is there a reason I did well? Just kind of go from there. I've really enjoyed the training, really enjoyed riding the downhill bike. I've enjoyed thinking about it. Ben and I had a mega time. We missed you on the hill, obviously, but we had a great time, riding down steep tracks, landing on our heads.
That's good to hear, man. Definitely, that is good to hear, and we'll talk a little bit about that, like post event analysis in a little bit. But Ben, you landed yourself in third place on the podium, a bronze medal at national champs, mate. Can you believe it? Does it feel real yet?
I can't believe it. No, I know.
Did you come home to a fanfare?
No, well, so my youngest was like, "Oh, it's the third place." I'd have come second. So, yeah, thanks, Sam. It hasn't really. I mean, if we'd said this was going to happen at the start of this project, I'd have been like, "Yeah, whatever." I mean, it's not. It's an amazing thing to have taken place. We came into this race. I came into this race going, yeah, I feel like this one doesn't really matter because it's a small field. There's loads of people at the top end who are amazing. It's just going to be like another weekend to sort of trial the process, and improve it. So yeah, the process went well. I felt like I rode two pretty good competition runs. I was happy with all that. I think it's fair to say that I gained that medal and partly because some people were probably throwing it all in. Some of those top riders were probably throwing it all in for that national title, and in the conditions it didn't work out. So we lost Titley, who'd have been one of the favourites in the seeding run because he was injured.
Yeah, I hope he's all right. Actually, it was a pretty big one. I think he looked pretty beaten up. So shout out to Titley. Hope he was all right. He
was in front of me, and I saw his peak on the track, and then he looked very confused at the bottom. So yeah, I hope he's okay. Will Longdon didn't catch me up, but also came. I think 5 minutes 13. So he obviously had some big issue. I know that Dave List, who did well at the Pierce, I think he had an issue as well. So I've kind of benefited from other people's misfortune, but hey, I
can't win if you tip over.
Yeah,
exactly.
You got to get to the bottom of the track.
I've got a bronze medal at the national champs. I'm never going to forget that. So thank you as well, Chris, for making this a possibility as well.
Oh, no, mate, you boys did the work this weekend. Yeah. It was super impressive to see, and kind of cool in a way because you boys have quite long drives home. Luckily, I live pretty close to this venue that we've been racing at, but you boys both have long drives, so obviously it makes sense. You're keen to get away after our runs are finished, but obviously we had to hang around to podiums, which meant we got to go and watch the elites on track, which was pretty cool, because I'm not sure when you guys last got the chance to stand trackside and watch some of those top riders, but it was pretty good fun. There was some good heckling from some of the younger lads that came up to watch. It was quite amusing. Johnny, any takeaways from watching the top men and women down the hill?
It was just great to see the speed, and the level of commitment. We were on the S bends in the lower woods, for anyone familiar with the track, and the variety of lines through that section was great. It was I'd ridden half of them by accident, but the way they committed, and I don't think it would be cool to kind of be Ben Cathro and be ghosting people to see what the quickest line was, but it almost felt like there wasn't a best line. It was almost who committed to the line they were doing the best. So there was a couple of guys who were doing inside to inside, which looked amazing. It involved a nice shroud on the exit, but maybe didn't set you up as well for the next corner. And Matt Walker, who ended up on top, he just rounded both corners really nicely.
Yeah, on the main line, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, on the main line. So you can argue that, well, obviously we don't know what they did on the rest of the tracks, and we're only looking at one small section of track. So, you know, maybe there was one guy who absolutely nailed that section, but he might have been lower down the order because of what happened elsewhere on the track. But it was still brilliant to see that level of commitment and, you know, exactly what the top guys are doing. It was really good. You know, there's a lot of fun, and those kids made it incredibly amusing as well.
It was amusing, yeah. Benoit, what about you? You enjoy watching the top few three?
It's just utterly humbling to see the pace that they go at. Through, you know, it's kind of it threads its way through trees. It's rough. You come into it at pace off a fire road with a massive berm before it, and we could, even from where we were, we could see some people jumping into this section that I'm just like tentatively tottering into on my race run because I'm terrified about what's going to happen. It really is just another level, and I just don't know how they process it so fast. But we were seeing, and like, there's multiple lines through that section, and everyone was being used by someone to greater or lesser extent. And we see them do stuff that I just don't think is possible. It's like Johnny's talking about that shroud. It's a front wheel shroud, basically. You can't shroud the front wheel. It's like, how do they, you know, intentionally? It did look
like there was no way they could make that next turn. Like the direction change to make that happen was quite phenomenal to see.
It's just like, it's like poetry in motion.
Yeah, beautiful to watch. Awesome. All right, let's talk about like where we go from here. Like, Ben, obviously stoked on that result. Are there like learnings or lessons from you? Like, how do you take this weekend and then move forwards towards our final race in a couple of months' time?
I think we've it's just given me a lot more confidence, regardless of the result. It's given me confidence in the process. It worked even with the changing conditions. I feel like I've got I know how to approach a race weekend. I've given it a lot more thought than I ever would have done previously. So I've got ideas now about how I'm going to start my runs, what I'll be aiming at, start to sort of focus maybe a little bit more on key sections of the track where perhaps that they don't feel like key sections, but thinking more about where you might be carrying more speed into. So one thing that I've been reflecting on was there'll often be like a section of the track that doesn't look like anything that important, but it sets you up for then maybe a long straightaway or something, and it's maybe an area where I might take a breather or just relax a little bit. So for instance, where we crossed on this weekend, you came out of the two steep sections, you crossed the fire road, and you went into the long straight section, which had two big floaty jumps in it. Yeah. And I would sit up there, compose myself, take a bit of a rest. But if you, on reflection, probably putting in a few pedal strokes down there, and then maybe sitting up and having a bit of a rest. But that boost in speed will just pick you up a little bit more time. So trying to think a little bit more tactically on sections like that.
That makes sense. A track walk becomes even more important in that instance, I guess, because you're trying to pinpoint some of that stuff, and it will shake out a bit more as you ride the track and you understand it better. But you can find some of that stuff certainly in track walk. Like,
so less of a focus on lines through sections necessarily, more thinking about how to maintain overall speed.
Yeah, it was interesting. I walked the track with Ollie Morris on the Friday night, who's like line guy for Mondraker at the World Cups, coaches mountain biking, very talented elite rider, and he was taking up a load of the younger lads that he works with and helps out, and kind of taking them through the track. And it was really interesting the way he was looking at stuff with them. He's like, right, like your exit speed from this turn is your speed from here, like for the next like however long. And you think about it, like actually he's right. Like there's not much between here and 6 or 7 turns or whatever it is further down the track where anything's gonna change. Like you've got to get this exit right, or you've got to carry speed here. Like there's a real thought of where is your speed coming from and how are you going to maintain it, which is definitely sort of changes how you look at stuff. So we'll have to see if we can all get to Hopton at a reasonable hour. Maybe we can hop on the Ollie Morris track walk train and get some learning done then.
Can we quickly talk about Benoit's finding time, and yours, Chris, per minute that you scoffed at me about, and then you both went out and tried and did?
Yeah,
we can.
We can.
So, was it rubbish or did it work in hindsight?
I mean, I found time per minute.
Do you think it?
Sure.
Do you think it was beneficial into the weekend?
I mean, it's not. It's just nice to know. I think I've said this before in here. Like, I'm quite evidence based. Hence the journal that I've sort of been trying to keep when I ride to build that evidence to convince myself I'm all right at riding bikes. So when you go down and you put in a run that's 4 minutes, and then at the end of the day you knock 20 seconds off that, that's not going to make you feel bad. It definitely makes you feel good. So I think the fact that, like, I was right, it was a very different track to what we raced Pierce, but similar time. So I knew I'd done like 4 minutes at Pierce and I wasn't super happy with it, and being able to knock 20 seconds off that would have been a much better result for me. And I'd seen that I was able to do that throughout a day of like thinking about the track, getting the bike set up a little bit better, like thinking about carrying like speed through turns, looking up a bit more so that I'm not getting surprised by stuff, and that I'm on the right line because I'm looking far enough ahead to see where the track goes, instead of being like, oh, hang on a minute, I should be over there because I've not seen it until too late. So for me, yeah, definitely, like it's a good confidence boost. I think there's still more of that to be done. And I think I said to you, like, afterwards I dug out my handlebar stopwatch because I was just doing it with a stopwatch on the Wahoo watches that we've got, which obviously you've got to take your hand off the bar to start and stop, whereas we've all bought these little sport count watches that you can get on the bar. So I've dug that out with the intent of riding more with a stopwatch because I think it is beneficial. But the battery was flat. But thanks to Benoit for the small screwdriver,
tiny screwdriver,
now fixed. The tiny screwdriver that is now fixed and it's got a new battery, and so I'm ready to go and do some more testing on that. Yeah, Ben, what about you?
Yeah, I take it all back because I think I said 4 seconds a minute. No, I don't think many people can really pull that off, Johnny. So I went out and gave it a go on about a 60-second run at Warncliffe, and I knocked 5 seconds off over a minute from a sighting run. So it's true. It's, that was quite an eye opener, actually. It was quite an eye opener because that was just from technique, those two techniques, trying to go a bit faster than I was comfortable with and trying to carry a bit more speed out of turns, and it built up and it built up, and it was 5 seconds.
Yeah, cool.
So yeah, you were right.
Brilliant. I think I'm happy we've got that on record.
I suppose that's one thing to add. So this weekend I was planning to use that little watch on the bars and try and see, how speed built over the weekend, but it just wasn't. It's hard when you're on a course with other people. You're not necessarily going to get a clean run. The weather gave us other stuff to think about as well. So maybe Hopton. Yeah, that's something to try and use, because that would be great. As you're saying, Chris, it'd give you that encouragement that things are moving forwards.
Yeah, and I might just stick it on whatever bike I go out for a ride on. Like, and if you're doing the same track more than once in a day, just do it once, put a time down, do it again, and think more about what you're doing on the second run and see what you can get. Like, it's nice to see what going faster actually involves and have that evidence. So riding with timing is useful, I think. It's
probably worth mentioning as well that we had timing. This was another pro thing about the weekend. We had like a World Cup style little timing chip on the bottom of our fork legs. It was proper pro. But they had we were timed on every run through the weekend using that chip. So we could have looked at be way more accurate than on the handlebar watches. We could have used those splits. I think with a bit more prior knowledge and thought about that.
Yeah, I don't know how, whether you just have to go to the timing like box and go and ask or what.
Yeah,
there was a screen up and it was just scrolling. Like, so you come through the finish area and your time would be at the top. And so it wasn't ranking or anything, it was just doing it like just on a rotating basis.
So you could like come and scribble that into your phone after every run and then look at how you're doing throughout the day.
It's all up there on the timing website. The weekend
nice.
As well. So
good to know. All right, fair play. Johnny, what about you? You're renowned for your in-depth analysis of performance. Like, what have you been doing since you left the race venue on Sunday?
Well, primarily I've been cleaning.
It's a good few hours worth of cleanup from that race, eh?
I did the pre-wash on my race kit on Monday, which took a couple of hours, and then washed my bike today. But I'd also been mulling over like the weekend, especially on the drive home. I think it was about 4 hours for me, and I was thinking about things. And one thing that stuck out was, the morning of Saturday, I felt I was riding at my best, to the point that I was not getting cocky, but that fast fire road crossing, instead of pre-jumping it, I pulled up off it. Just to see what would happen, and I bottomed out my forks, which is the first time I've done that on those forks. Which I always had it in the back of my head. I've not bottomed these forks out, and I'm not running a lot of pressure in them, and I'm not running any tokens. So I'm running 70 psi, which is the pressure for. If I check my phone, which is going to be depressing. Sorry for the port. So for somebody who, for 70 psi, you're looking at somebody who is probably about 70 to 72 kilos. Mm-hmm. I'm not 70 to 72 kilos.
No, you're in the 80 to 82 when you're riding. 80 to 82
kilos. So, really it should, however, that was the pressure that I was, getting the, appropriate amount of sag. And that I'd worked with Rich on the setup day, and I'd had a really nice balance on the bike. I've ridden it a lot, however, after that, I was bottoming the fork out a lot more, and even as I backed off during the weekend to try and get down the hill without crashing, I was still bottoming out the fork a lot. So it just had me questioning if had something changed. So yeah, trying to figure that out really now. And
I spoke to Rich briefly today, and also Geordie from Fox, to see if they could think of anything that could have changed from a bottom out event. Neither of those guys had anything that they thought could have gone on, but it does seem strange that you've never bottomed out the fork and now you're managing to do that multiple times per run. It is a bit unusual.
Yeah, and it's almost that it's behaving now in a way more in line with the recommended settings, which is kind of weird. So I don't have an answer for it. We've had a chat earlier today, and obviously, as you said, you've been in contact with some people. I thought it was funny that Geordie said that I could be in a category of 1 if I can make a fork run with 70 psi with no tokens. And I have been making it work. I ran those settings for the Pierce race at the same venue in the dry, a lot faster, and I didn't have any bottom outs. So.
Yeah, weird, eh?
It's very strange.
Super weird. So where do you go from here then? Like, obviously you want to get back to a position where you think the bike setup's where you want it to be. Like, how do you do that?
So I think I have to ride it as it is to see whether it behaves how it did before, or it behaves how it is behaving now. And if that's the case, then I just have to accept that, and I'm going to just go to the recommended settings for the weight, and then try and get back to a balance of the bike that's working. It's annoying. It feels like if that is the case, then it's a bit of a step back and trying to figure out what what to do next. But it's always been in the back of my mind that something might not be right, but it felt fine. And I don't know, maybe it's just a big old bedding in process that I needed a big old bottom out, but who knows?
Who knows? Forces you to go riding though, right? It's good reason to get out on some bike time.
Exactly. Oh, Jen, I need to go out. My forks aren't working.
Class, good stuff. So yeah, next couple of months then it is pretty much bang on 2 months, I think, till our final race of the year. We're going to be hopefully recording a few episodes with some experts from the mountain bike world to pick their brains on little areas that everyone can learn from, hopefully, and look to get better. Like, any specific plans for either of the two of you? Ben, maybe we'll start for you. Like, are there key focus points, be that on like your body, your fitness, your bike, your riding, like anything, or just more of the same?
Champagne opening skills.
Yeah, you need to brush up on your champagne skills, mate. That was
right. I think, like you were saying earlier, digging out some track preview videos for Hopton. I'm imagining Hopton's not got the gradient of Rhydyfelin.
Correct.
So probably some pedaling focus on the training might be beneficial there, but just trying to keep up the gym work. The issue I always have over the summer is the kids are off school, routine totally goes to pot. I've got a bit of a holiday, time away, so it'll be a mess on the training front, but I'll get to do a fair bit of riding. So just getting the old stopwatch out.
Yeah, definitely. I will 100% be spending some time on the stopwatch.
Yeah, working on that.
Yeah. Johnny, any like certain plans? Obviously, go and get this bike kind of reback to where you want it to be, but like beyond that?
Yeah, it's similar to Ben, really. Same kind of issues with the kids being off, but I think I want to try and get to a bike park or two to, have some uplift days, just a bit more kind of, rather than having to go and push up and, ride a single track, just a bit more varied terrain and faster time on a bike. Like faster as in like faster speeds. And some training, really, I think. Just maybe not something too specific, but I just want to keep that ball rolling and the gym work, and just kind of and then listen avidly to whoever you plan to get on the podcast. Is Ollie coming to Hopton? Is he racing Hopton?
I believe so, yeah. I think he was doing quite a few of the Pierce, but he had some concussion issues early in the season which kept him away from the races. But yeah, I think he'll be there.
It'd be really good to persuade him that he wants to do a couple of practice runs with us.
I'm sure we could. He likes riding bikes, so
that would be really cool if we could persuade him.
Nice, good stuff. Cool, yeah. And then for me, I think more time on the stopwatch, irrespective of what bike it is. Just thinking about it, like going quicker, basically, and then trying to get to a point where I can exercise properly again, because that I feel like I've lost a lot there. Like, I feel pretty rough. I've been doing a bit of movement, like some light yoga and stuff like that. God, it sounds dull, but it's been pretty horrible. Like, not being able to do any, like literally do any exercise for 4 weeks is kind of doesn't feel right, and it doesn't feel good. So yeah, it was nice to get out for a little spin in the sun this afternoon, albeit very gentle, but we'll keep up in it a little bit, see where we get to, and hopefully we'll be good to go pretty soon. So yeah, thanks boys, it was an amazing weekend. I'm very proud of like the attitude that both of you took throughout the weekend. Like, you kept it fun, you kept it light, when other people were maybe not having quite so much joy out there. It was cool to see you boys making the most out of it, enjoying your time on the bikes, and bringing home what would have been 2 podium spots at a normal round with a 3rd and a 5th. So yeah, good work.
We have to mention as well quickly that the last time we maybe did a wet race like this was a long time ago, and this time we had some like jet pressure washers with us.
Yeah,
they
true.
made a massive difference. I think the improvement in not only like our kit and the bikes and like some of the practical equipment did make a big difference this weekend.
Waterproofs that work, the ability to clean the bike on site, brakes that work really well in the wet, to be fair. Magura, shout out.
The bikes were working really well.
Yeah.
There's nothing, you literally, as long as you keep it relatively like clean, nothing, you don't need to do anything.
No.
It is good, isn't it?
And then take it I was surprised that, you know, derobing at the end of the day, and I had waterproof socks on. My socks underneath those were dry, and I wasn't actually dirty despite all that mud. You know, a bit in the beard, but I wasn't actually that muddy. So it was
It's still a bit, mate, just in your left ear.
Yeah, probably. The kit's still picking mud out of things.
Nice one. Yeah, super fun weekend, and hopefully looking forward to some bike time actually with you guys at the next race, and maybe even before then. So have a good couple of months, and we'll be in touch soon.
All right, cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.